became the greatest military aviator in history. After graduation, Chuck served as an airplane mechanic in the United States Army Air Forces. 3 months later, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. The Axis powers declared war. War had come to America. And after a few months as a mechanic, Chuck Yeager applied to be a pilot. And that changed history. He later said he made that fateful decision because he was sick of getting kitchen duty. And he also said, and I quote, "I noticed the pilots didn't have dirty hands. They all had beautiful girls on their arms." On his first flight, Private Yeager, history records, was nervous. But it wasn't long before he distinguished himself as the best pilot in his class. A year later, he deployed to Europe. At just 20 years of age, he flew 8 combat missions and shot down 2 Nazi fighter bombs. On his 8th mission, he was shot down over France. Wounded in the leg and in his head, he was smuggled over the mountains into Spain by the French underground. But as soon as he was able, Chuck Yeager petitioned to go right back into the fight. And when his request was denied, he appealed to the Supreme Allied Commander. Fortunately for us, General Dwight Eisenhower granted his request. Downed pilots were usually not sent back into combat, but in the case of Chuck Yeager, General Eisenhower made an exception. And on 12 October 1944, leading 3 fighter squadrons escorting bombers over Germany, he shot down 5 enemy planes, making him an ace in a single day. Just a month later, he shot down another 4 enemy planes in a single day. If that was all he had accomplished, Chuck Yeager would be remembered as a great American hero of aviation. But he was just 22 years of age, and he was just getting started. While he was training in California, he went to a local gym to help organize a U.S. Open dance. And that's where he met glamorous Glennis, who he would go on to say was as pretty as a movie star. He succeeded in organizing the dance, so he took Glennis on their first date, and Chuck and Glennis were married for 45 years. Together they raised 4 amazing children, including 2 sons who served in the uniform of the United States as well. After the war, with Glennis at his side, he was sent to the Mojave Desert, to Edwards Air Force Base, as one of America's first test pilots. And in October 1947, wearing a football helmet that he bought with his own money, and with 2 broken ribs he didn't tell his commanding officer about, Chuck Yeager got into the cockpit of the glamorous Glennis, and became the first human being ever to break the sound barrier. At just 24 years of age, Chuck Yeager became an inspiration to an entire generation of American pilots. From that day forward, they tried to imitate his daring maneuvers, his unshakable confidence. In fact, the author Tom Wolfe later wrote that they even copied the way he talked. As Wolfe wrote in that timeless book, and I quote, "Anyone who travels on airlines in the United States gets to know the voice of an airline pilot over the intercom, the down-home calmness. But they also hear that pilots from Massachusetts to Oregon began talking with a West Virginia accent. His influence was extraordinary. And when war came to America again, Chuck Yeager stepped forward again. He became one of the first Americans to fly a Soviet-made fighter after one was seized over North Korea. And when the Vietnam War came, he flew another 127 combat missions in the service of the United States. All told, over more than 30 years of service, Chuck Yeager flew more than 350 military planes, a total of more than 10,000 hours. Chuck Yeager inspired generations of American pilots. But General Yeager was also an inspiration to our astronauts, and the breakthroughs that he achieved as a test pilot made our space program possible. In fact, General Yeager led the Air Force Aerospace Research Pilot School, where he trained almost half of the airmen who would one day become astronauts in space programs that took us to the moon. In fact, we're joined by another heroic American airman who was actually hired by General Yeager to serve with him in that assignment. That aviator would go on to serve 5 different Apollo missions, including serving as the immortal voice, responding to Neil Armstrong during Apollo 11. He's a patriot, a witness of faith, and the youngest man ever to walk on the moon. Would you all join me in thanking General Charlie Duke for his lifetime of service and his presence here today. Chuck Yeager lived a great American life. But for all his accomplishments, his greatest accomplishment was surely his family. A decade after the Yeager family lost Glennis, Chuck was blessed to find love for a second time. One day he was hiking a trail in California when he met the second love of his life. The woman Chuck was known to call, quote, an excellent wingman. So to Victoria, we thank you. We thank you for your love for this good and great man. And the sympathies of the nation are with you. It's a great honor for me to be here today as Vice President of the United States to pay tribute to America's greatest aviator. But to Victoria and the entire Yeager family, let me say it's also a personal privilege that I will cherish for the rest of my life. You see, my wife's father was an officer in the Air Force. He inspired Karen to get her pilot's license when she was just in her 20s. Our son is a Marine Corps fighter pilot. Our son-in-law is a Navy fighter pilot, currently deployed overseas. And then my son-in-law's late father was an aviation enthusiast and a pilot. And what generations of our family have in common is that we've all been inspired by the life and service and heroism of General Chuck Yeager. But the truth is, Chuck Yeager has been an inspiration to every American pilot, and it will be throughout time. In fact, the crew of the cockpit of Air Force 2 told me this morning before we took off from Andrews Air Force Base how deeply honored they were to have the privilege to carry General Chuck Yeager on his last flight back home to West Virginia. When our son was a little boy, we hung a poem that his Air Force grandfather had framed, and it now hangs in his home, not far from the base where he's stationed. It's entitled High Flag. And as America bids farewell to our nation's greatest aviator, the words seem altogether fitting, and I believe they are reflective of the prayer of millions of Americans on this day. As we think about that day that General Yeager broke the last barrier and stepped into eternity in the indelible memory of the American people. That poem reads. Oh, I have stood the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies. On laughter's silver wings, sunward I've climbed and joined tumbling earth. Sun-split clouds. You've done 100 things you have not dreamed of, wielded sword and swung high in sunlit skies. Hovering there, I chased shouting men along and flung my eager craft through the footless halls of air. Up the long, delirious, burning blue, I've topped the wind, swept heights to easy grace, where never lark or even eagle flew. And while, with silent lifting mind, I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand, touched the face of God. It's a poem and it's a word. It is great America. On the death of Abner, it is written that King David said, "Do you not realize that a commander and a great man has fallen in his service?" Chuck Yeager is such a man. He was a commander of enormous courage. And Chuck Yeager was a great man who dedicated his life to the service of his country. The Bible tells us to mourn with those who mourn, to grieve with those who grieve. We do not grieve like those who have none, because our faith gives us and heroes give us hope for the day, hope for tomorrow. America will cherish always the memory and the service and the example of General Chuck Yeager. And America will never fail to produce those who follow in his footsteps, who come from the city or the farm, from sea to shining sea, or even from deep in the heart, to defend the greatest nation. And I know that as long as Americans push the boundaries of what's possible, as long as we're brave enough to push it outside of the envelope, and as long as American pilots and astronauts soar to the skies and the great beyond, the life, the example, the courage of General Chuck Yeager will ever inspire. May God bless the memory of General Chuck Yeager. May God comfort family and friends. And may God continue to bless the United States.